The floorboards creaked just outside his door at midnight, same as they had for the past 3 weeks. Marcus Thornfield lay perfectly still beneath his quilted covers, controlling his breathing to the slow, steady rhythm of sleep, while his heart hammered against his ribs. The brass doorknob turned with barely a whisper. She thought he was asleep. Hell, she was supposed to think that. Clara moved like morning mist through his bedroom, her bare feet silent against the Persian rug his late wife had insisted on buying from that traveling merchant years ago. Through his barely open eyelids, Marcus watched her approach his nightstand, where a glass of water sat untouched, as it did every night. What she did next had kept him awake for weeks, pretending to slumber, just to witness it again. The Thornfield Ranch stretched across 3,000 acres of prime Montana territory, and Marcus owned every blade of grass, every head of cattle, every timber beam of the sprawling house that had taken 2 years to build. Men in Helena tipped their hats when he passed. Politicians sought his endorsement. Railroad barons courted his business. But none of that mattered when Clara Henderson slipped into his room each night like a secret he couldn't solve. She'd arrived 6 months ago with nothing but a tattered carpetbag and a letter of recommendation from a family in Denver who'd moved east. Shy as a spooked doe, speaking only when spoken to, keeping her eyes downcast whenever he was near. During the day, she was invisible efficiency. Meals appeared on time, his clothes were pressed and mended, the house gleamed without him ever seeing her work. But at night, she became something else entirely. Clara reached for the water glass, and Marcus tensed beneath his covers. Through the crack between his eyelids, he watched her small hands cradle the glass like it held liquid gold. She lifted it toward her lips, hesitated, then glanced toward his supposedly sleeping form. Her dark hair had escaped its usual tight bun, falling in waves around her shoulders. In the moonlight streaming through his window, she looked nothing like the timid maid who served his breakfast with trembling hands. What happened next would change everything between them, though neither knew it yet. The glass paused at her lips as a sound drifted through the night air, hoofbeats approaching fast across the hardpan, too many riders moving too urgently for any social call. Clara froze, the water glass suspended inches from her mouth. The hoofbeats grew louder, accompanied by the jingle of spurs and the creak of leather. Marcus fought every instinct screaming at him to sit up, to protect her, to demand answers about why she was in his room. Instead, he remained motionless, watching as she set the glass down with infinite care and crept toward the window. She pulled the curtain aside just enough to peer out, and her sharp intake of breath told him everything. Trouble had found the Thornfield Ranch, and it was riding hard. "Mr. Thornfield," she whispered, so softly he almost missed it. When he didn't respond, she said it again, urgent now. "Marcus." The sound of his Christian name on her lips sent a shock through him. In 6 months, she'd never called him anything but Sir, or Mr. Thornfield, but he held his breathing steady, committed now to this deception that felt more dangerous with each passing second. Clara turned from the window and approached his bed. She knelt beside it, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used, could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Her hand hovered over his shoulder, trembling. "Please wake up," she breathed. "They're coming for me." The confession hit him like a physical blow, but Marcus forced himself to remain still as carved tone. Through his lashes, he saw tears tracking down her cheeks, saw the raw terror in her dark eyes. She wasn't just his shy maid, she was running from something. Someone. A fist pounded against the front door downstairs, loud enough to wake the dead. Clara jumped, her hand accidentally brushing his shoulder. Even that feather-light touch sent electricity through him, but he maintained the charade of sleep even as his mind raced. Who was hunting her? What had she done? And why did the thought of anyone hurting her make his hands curl into fists beneath the covers? "Thornfield," a voice bellowed from the front porch. "We know she's here. Send out Clara Henderson, and nobody gets hurt." Clara's face crumpled. She pressed her palm flat against his chest, directly over his racing heart, and whispered, "I'm sorry. For everything. For lying to you, for bringing this to your door, for—" Her voice broke. "For falling in love with a man who will never see me as anything more than the help." The pounding on the door grew more insistent, accompanied now by the sound of men spreading out around the house. Marcus realized with crystalline clarity that the next choice he made would define not just this night, but the rest of his life. The front door splintered. Clara gasped and scrambled backward from the bed, pressing herself against the far wall like a cornered animal. Heavy boots stomped through the entryway below, accompanied by rough voices and the scrape of spurs against his polished hardwood floors. Marcus had exactly 3 seconds to decide: maintain his pretense of sleep and let whatever was about to happen unfold, or abandon the charade and face the truth about the woman who'd been stealing into his room each night. "Spread out!" commanded a gravelly voice Marcus didn't recognize. "Check every room. She's here somewhere, and that rich bastard's probably hiding her." Through the broken front door came the sound of more horses, more men. How many? 6? 8? Marcus tried to count boot steps on his stairs, but they blended together into an ominous thunder. Clara whimpered, a sound so small and broken it nearly shattered his resolve to remain motionless. She pressed her back against the wall, beside his wardrobe, her white nightgown making her a ghost in the moonlight. Her dark hair fell like a curtain around her face, but he could see her shoulders shaking, not from cold, from fear so pure it radiated off her in waves. The bedroom door exploded open. 3 men filled the doorway, their faces hidden beneath hat brims and shadow. The leader stepped forward, his hand resting on the grip of his Colt. "Well, well, sleeping like a baby while his whore hides in the corner." "I'm not his whore," Clara said quietly, lifting her chin with a dignity that made Marcus's chest tighten. "And he doesn't know anything about this." The man's laugh was ugly. "Sweet Clara, still protecting folks who don't give a damn about you. Did you tell your rich employer about Denver? About what you did to Thomas Garrett?" Marcus felt Clara's eyes on him, searching his face for any sign he was awake, any indication he could help her. But he held his breathing steady, trapped now in a web of his own making. If he revealed he had been conscious this whole time, she'd know he'd heard everything: her confession, her tears, her whispered declaration of love. "Thomas Garrett was a monster," Clara said, her voice stronger now. "And what I did, I'd do again." The leader drew his pistol. "That's what his widow figured you'd say. She's paying good money to bring you back to Denver for a proper hanging." "Please," Clara whispered, but not to the men with guns. Her eyes were fixed on Marcus's supposedly sleeping form. "Please don't let them take me back there." The sound of his name, not spoken aloud, but shaped by her lips in desperate silence, nearly broke him. The leader noticed her gaze and smiled coldly. "He can't help you, darling. Rich men like Thornfield, they don't risk their necks for the hired help." But Clara wasn't looking at Marcus like hired help looks at an employer. Even facing 3 armed men, even with death riding hard toward her, she gazed at his motionless form with something that took Marcus's breath away. Absolute trust. As if she believed, despite everything, that somehow he would save her. "You know what's funny?" the leader continued, holstering his gun and pulling out a length of rope instead. "She's been taking care of you real nice, I bet. Cooking, cleaning, probably warming your bed when the nights get cold." "It wasn't like that," Clara said quietly. He's a good man. Good men don't harbor fugitives. He didn't know what I was running from." The leader approached her slowly, savoring her fear. "What were you running from, Clara? Tell your sleeping prince the whole truth before we drag you back to Denver." Clara's eyes never left Marcus's face as she began to speak, her voice steady despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. "Thomas Garrett owned the largest cattle ranch in Denver. He also owned the sheriff, the judge, and half the politicians in Colorado Territory. When his wife died in that riding accident, he decided he needed a new woman to entertain him." The rope creaked as the leader worked it into a noose. "I was working in his kitchen, 17 years old, nobody to speak for me, nobody who'd believe my word against his. For months, he—" Her voice broke, then strengthened. "The night I finally fought back, the night I grabbed his own rifle and put a bullet in his black heart, I thought I was free. But Mrs. Garrett, his sister-in-law who inherited everything, she put a price on my head, said I was a thief and a murderer." Marcus felt something shift deep in his chest, a protective rage so fierce it took all his willpower not to surge upright and put himself between Clara and these men. "So you ran," one of the other men said, "and found yourself another rich man to fool." "No." Clara's voice was fierce now, defiant. "I found work, honest work, and I found—" She looked directly at Marcus, speaking as if he could hear every word. "I found a man who treats his people with respect, who says please and thank you to a maid, who leaves books on the kitchen table because he knows I like to read, who pretends not to notice when I take a little extra food to the widow Henderson down the road." The leader slipped the noose over her head. How touching. Too bad he's sleeping right through your last confession. But Clara smiled through her tears, an expression so beautiful and heartbreaking that Marcus nearly gasped aloud. No, she whispered, her eyes locked on his supposedly sleeping face. He's not. Marcus Thornfield sat up like resurrection itself. The three men spun toward the bed, hands flying to their weapons, but Marcus was already moving. 6 months of watching Clara move through his house like a prayer had taught him to appreciate grace under pressure. 2 years of grieving his wife had taught him the value of second chances. And 34 years of living in Montana territory had taught him how to shoot. His Colt cleared leather before the first bounty hunter's gun was halfway drawn. The leader's eyes went wide as Marcus put a bullet center mass, dropping him where he stood. The second man managed to clear his holster before Marcus's second shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him into the wall. The third man raised his hands and backed toward the door. "Mister, we had a legal warrant from a corrupt judge in Colorado." Marcus kept his gun trained on the survivor while moving to Clara's side. With gentle hands, he lifted the noose from around her neck and tossed it aside. "That warrant's not worth the paper it's printed on in Montana territory." Clara stared at him, her dark eyes wide with shock. "You heard everything." Every word. He holstered his gun and cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears, including the part where you said you loved a man who'd never see you as more than the help. Her breath caught. "Marcus, you were wrong about that part." His voice was rough with emotion. "Dead wrong." The surviving bounty hunter cleared his throat. "Look, mister, we'll just take our dead and you'll take your dead and ride hard for the territorial line," Marcus said without taking his eyes off Clara. "And you'll spread the word that Clara Henderson is under the protection of Marcus Thornfield. Any man who rides onto my land looking to harm her will leave in a pine box." After the men were gone, after the bodies were removed and the broken door temporarily barricaded, Marcus led Clara to the kitchen, where he'd left so many books for her to find. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why risk everything for someone like me?" Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of her. "You want to know what I saw those nights when you came to my room? I saw a woman who thought she was stealing water from my bedside table because she was too proud to ask for a drink. I saw someone who cared more about my comfort than her own thirst." Clara's cheeks flushed. "I was so embarrassed during the day, stammering around you like a fool, but at night, when I thought you were sleeping, I could pretend what? That I belonged here, that this was home." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "Clara Henderson, you killed a man who would have destroyed you. You ran 1,000 miles to build a new life. You've got more courage in your little finger than most men have in their whole bodies. And if you'll have me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to run again." Years later, when the Thornfield Ranch had grown to encompass 5,000 acres and Clara had become one of the most respected women in Helena, she would remember that dawn in the kitchen when a rich cowboy asked a fugitive maid to marry him. She would remember how the morning light caught the silver in his hair, how his hands shook when she said yes, how they sealed their engagement with coffee that had gone cold while they planned a future neither had dared to dream. But most of all, she would remember the moment she realized that sometimes the best way to hide is to stop running, and the best way to find love is to stop pretending to sleep through it.